Anyway, so today's fun and interesting and wild and crazy topic that I'm sure everyone dreams about every night is firmware, right? So we're going to be covering all different topics about firmware. What is firmware? We're actually going to talk a bit. We're going to kind of take a path back in history a bit, and we're going to talk a bit about the progression of firmware over the years, just so we can kind of see what we've done over the years, and then we're going to go a little bit into the future, right? And we're going to talk about some of the firmware features that we are planning in the near future. For example, 5.1, and also 6.0, which is also somewhat in the near future, fully developed and kind of in testing phase. We're also going to talk about upgrading your equipment. Joel's going to be our wonderful presenter of showing how to use the COBRA reprogramming software, which there's not really that much to it. It's actually quite easy. But he's going to give you a bit of a live demonstration. And then we're also going to end things with some Q&A. And as always in true COBRA fashion, maybe some after hours Q&A, kind of hang out with us, have a few drinks and just chill if you want or not. Excellent. So that is our agenda. And I'm going to probably hash this out a little bit more. This will be a fairly PowerPoint heavy webinar. I'm going to augment it with a couple of visual displays. And again, Johnny number 5 will be our robot tour guide and drink queue throughout the process. So he'll make some small appearances, but we're going to again talk about what firmware is. We're going to talk about what hardware versions are. We're going to talk about obviously what firmware versions are, past, present, future. And again, a little bit of a live demonstration of the reprogramming software. Excellent. So let's get into why we develop firmware. So why does COBRA, or really why does any company develop firmware? Obviously, as apps become more prevalent, as smart devices within not just your phone, but also within your home or work environments are becoming more popular, the concept of firmware is something that is not necessarily as new today as it used to be. Firmware is essentially software that gets placed onto some form of an embedded device, right? So, everything from your microwave in your house to your smartphone to obviously, really pretty much, to your phone, and by phone, I'm sorry, by, watches and things like that. Pretty much anything that has a microcontroller or some form of a computer within it commonly has firmware. Obviously you're probably not going to wake up in the morning and update the firmware on your microwave, but I'm sure there are capabilities to do so. And COBRA, obviously, even though it's not a computer per se, it does have computer chips within it, integrated circuits that actually contain code. And the code that we place onto those computer chips does certain things. For example, when we want to add new features to the system, we will make changes to that code and add it to the system. Whenever we want to potentially fix a bug, that requires oftentimes code changes. If we ever want to enable some form of an integration, for example, the COBRA control panel is actually just an integration to an Android device. That would require us to perform a firmware update to introduce new code or changes to code. And then lastly, security. Security is obviously very important with anything. And, when I'm talking about security, I'm talking about not only just wireless security, but also security with the user features of the system. Those are reasons why we would develop and enhance security. Some examples of those features and improvements would be, for example, in our 3.0 release, we added the ability to support unlimited queue and channel firing. In 4.0, we introduced the COBRA control panel, and then in 5.0, we introduced mesh functionality. So those are just some examples of brand new features, that was purely done with just firmware, essentially software, writing code, okay? Okay, so what is firmware? So we talked about it before. It's just basically code that gets loaded into chips, right? And if you think about all the COBRA equipment that we offer, for example, the 18R2, the 36M, 72M, 18M, soon to come 6M, audio box, all of these units, and I actually have one right now, so I'm just going to kind of hold this up. This is actually the motherboard of the 18R2. So if you focus your attention on my camera, and you'll see here, this is the motherboard of the 18R2. And on this device, there's a couple of things. The thing right here on the top, this little guy right here, This is actually the transceiver, okay? And the transceiver is one of the primary devices on all of our wireless core equipment systems that actually has firmware loaded onto it. This transceiver, which is technically more of an RF module, so it contains the transceiver chip, but also contains a processor, memory, things of that nature. It supports RF communications, so your radio frequency, your wireless communications come directly out of this chip. It does support logic and functionality, right? So take, for example, the 18M, it only has this one chip in it. That's it. And it contains not just the RF communications, but also the logic and functionality. These chips also have what's called I/O, which is inputs and outputs. So all these little tiny pins on here, and in some cases, we may turn these pins on and off to do different things. And in many cases, some of those pins can actually be ports that connect to other peripheral devices, or even in some cases the processor, and they can actually digitally communicate information by turning off in extreme rapid speeds and sending information. In order to update this transceiver, in order to update the firmware on this device, you do need to have the wireless reprogrammer, right? So oftentimes, and we'll talk about it as we get through things, when we're performing firmware updates to COBRA, oftentimes we have to do two different steps. The first step is often to update the transceiver. That's done using the wireless reprogrammer. And then the second step is to actually update, and if you go back to my PowerPoint presentation, what is the processor? So certain devices that we sell, for example, the 18R2, which I did actually add to this before, so I'm not sure why it's not showing, but at the bottom there, it should say 18R2, 36M, 72M, and the audio box. They both have a transceiver and a processor. The 6M and the 18M only have, and actually the 18R as well, only has a transceiver. And if you look at my board, so if you go back to my camera, you'll see on the 18R2, this square right here, this is actually the processor, right? So this processor, the reason we add it is because certain devices require this additional processor because we need more computing power. We need to do more things. We need to do things in parallel to the RF communications in order to support better timing, accuracy, more memory, just basically overall more functionality that can run at the same time and not bog down the system. The processor, very similar to the transceiver, supports logic and functionality. It also has I/O. And the process for updating the processor requires a simple USB drive, in which case with COBRA, we would load the .s19 file. So oftentimes with the 18R2, you'd use the COBRA S19 file. With the audio box, it's the audio box S19 file. I believe with the 36 and 72M, it's the 90M.s19 file. Anyway, so transceiver, processor, these are little microchips, little computers that require essentially new code to be written in order to improve the features. Excellent. A couple of little minor facts here is with firmware, you do need to match firmware in order for everything to run normally. So if you are running 5.0, all of your systems need to be running 5.0. If you're running 3.0, they all need to be running 3.0, right? And actually, if I'm going to take a little detour here, and if you go directly to our new help section, so if you go to help.cobrafiringsystems.com, this is also accessible right from the support tab of our website. This is brand new. If you weren't in our last webinar, we talked all about our new help portal. And here we're just going to type in hardware versions. We're going to go to, oops, let me see here. I think it was actually, let's see, versions, I think. Let's see, I'm going to do a little search here. And I believe it was actually in the user guide. So if we go to the user guide, and we go to the FAQs of the user guide, of course, there's 38 of them. And hopefully I can find this quickly and not be embarrassed. There we go. Okay, so this is actually the FAQ. So anyways, does my firmware version need to match between the 18R2 and other devices? It does. There's some intricacies of this. We'll post a link within the YouTube video. So if you're watching this on YouTube, just check out the description below. But generally speaking, it's just mainly, basically, in general, the firmware numbers essentially need to match, okay? And if they don't match, you will get an ER5 code on one of your devices. So if you ever see ER5, that's because the firmware is not matching. And then also the ER6 error code occurs when you're trying to update something like an 18R2 and the firmware is not matching between the transceiver and the processor, which we were just kind of explaining before, okay? So it is important that your firmware does match together. When we are writing software, we write in a variety of different languages, right? So the common languages include that we use on the transceivers, primarily Python. We also use Java, primarily on the control panel, which we write for Android. We also use C, primarily within the processors that we use. And also, in some cases, we actually write assembly language. And that assembly language is actually used either in C or also within Python to perform very, very, very specific tasks that we can't basically make happen with the libraries available or the functions available within Python or C. So, and this is a little bit of a code snippet, I believe, from the startup sequence of our 18M, just kind of showing that to you. So we actually are writing code. That code does then get loaded, basically produced into a compiled file that gets loaded into your systems. Okay, so how are systems updated with COBRA? Well, the old method of updating systems used a software called Portal. And so I'm sure if many of you are on this webinar may be familiar with it. It was a development tool that's provided by a company, Synapse, who actually produces much of kind of what you may want to call like the operating system, essentially of our wireless transceiver. And it did have a lot of steps. It was a bit complicated. It worked, but it really wasn't the best tool. Certainly not super easy to use, but at the same time not impossible to use. The new method, which we're going to be showing you today, is actually the COBRA reprogramming software. It is a PC-based version. In the future, we may make that available with Mac. And it is a wizard user interface. It's really easy to use. A lot of the documentation is built directly into it. And it's basically just a step-by-step process for performing the firmware updates. And again, Joel's going to cover that at the end of this webinar.
Hey, Scott, before you continue, I have a really good poll. And
Absolutely.
that is, how long did it take you to figure out how to use Portal? Just, a little social break here.
Mm-hmm. I made my child do it for me. See, I think we talked about this in a noon webinar. These are actually, it's actually quite common. A lot of smart like kids out there that used it. I waited for something easier to be released. That's probably some truth to that, right? I'd say so.
6 people right now. You're welcome to continue, and I'll let these.
I will continue. So. Excellent. All right. Okay, so let's talk a bit about hardware versions. There's, you'll see it, especially on our Facebook group page. People talk about what is a hardware version. Why the heck does COBRA have like hardware version A, hardware version B? Why are we doing this? What's the point? So what a hardware version is basically, when we first developed a product, for example, 10 years ago, when we first came out with the 18R and 18M, we used a transceiver chip called the CEL, which stands for California Eastern Labs, the ZIC, what we call the ZIC 2410, right? The ZIC 2410 was the model of a transceiver or an embedded RF module that California Eastern Labs sold. Worked well for our application at the time. But over time, like anything, we're not using, we're probably not, none of us are using the same phones that we were using back in 1980 or whatever it is. Technology improves, becomes better, faster, more power efficient, more capable. And so, better priced, things of that nature to a degree. And so new models get introduced. The good news is, even though they're introducing new hardware versions, the software can still run on them, right? So we're not throwing away, it's not like we have to rebuild COBRA on new hardware. We just have to use new platforms. And as we start doing that, we want to add new features that maybe the older hardware couldn't support. And so basically products end up becoming end of life. And in some cases that requires new hardware. And in some cases, for example, like the 18R2 actually has a different, and some of the newer units have different transceivers than the older ones, but there's absolutely zero functionality difference between them. In the 18MA, that's really one of the only exceptions today, is that the 18MA does have some restrictions. You know, for example, it can only fire 1/10 of a second. It's a little less power efficient, and some other different things, which I won't get too much into within this, but basically there are different hardware versions. Now, one of the things that we've done ever since we realized that new hardware versions were going to occur is, especially on the transceiver. So if you're looking at my camera up here, you'll notice that this transceiver, so on the 18MA, the transceiver is actually soldered to the board. Within our any other devices that we sell, whether it's the 6M, 18MB, 36M, 72M audio box, the transceiver is actually a pluggable device. So I literally can unplug this transceiver, if you look back at my camera, and I can take that off and I can plug that right back into, add it in there, and I just slipped. And you can plug that right back into the unit. So I just plugged that right back in. So what does that mean? Well, that means that maybe in 10 years from now, if this transceiver is obsolete or not necessary, or we can't support it anymore, right? The replacement cost is only the transceiver, not the entire motherboard, which is dramatically more expensive, right? So obviously we're going to continue to do our best to support everything that we can. I believe we've done that for the most part to date. It's not cheap, and it requires a lot of time in order to do that. And the goal is to do that as much as humanly possible. Obviously, 100 years from now, when none of us are here, you know, things will be quite different. But in the meantime, you know, for the time we have remaining, we're going to do our best to respect your wallet and ensure that you don't have to, you know, spend money and buy all new models of systems. Okay. So let's take some time and actually talk a bit about firmware versions in the past with COBRA. So all the way back when we had 2.0 at the time, and we moved to 3.0, 3.0 was a big deal. And the reason it was a big deal is because you weren't limited to firing only 2 channels within a 0.4 second time period. We introduced the ability for the 18R2 to actually upload the scripts into the modules and fire them based on a light timecode signal. By doing that, it allowed us to support an unlimited number of channels to be fired at the same time. So you can technically, if you had 100 modules on 100 different channels, you could fire all 18 queues. You wouldn't have the power to do that on the module, but if you could fire a queue or more on every one of those different channels at the exact same time, or really at any time throughout the script. We also added support for the COBRA audio box. So there's a decent amount of firmware that went into supporting the audio box. And also step scripting, right? And Joel does a great webinar on step scripting that I would check out. All right. Then we went from, oh, there's our boy Johnny, number 5. So go ahead, have a drink. He was, I don't know where he was. So he must have got lost. So he came back and he found us. So, and he's still rocking his cowboy outfit too. So drink for that. So when we went from 3.0 to 4.0, we introduced this really cool thing called the COBRA control panel. We wanted to create a complete graphical user interface into the COBRA system. And so when we did that, we introduced the device list interface, which was basically a full view into all of your devices, or at that time, basically your modules and your audio box. And also show controls, which is an interface for interacting with the scripted show. We introduced firmware capabilities for the COBRA Deadman. And we also introduced firmware capabilities for what are called alternate events, which is basically a way to fill unwanted black sky during your show, okay? And we have alternates 1 and alternates 2. I believe in 4.0 we just introduced 1, and then I believe in 5.0 we introduced alternate 2. Then we went from 4.0 to 5.0. This was a big move. We supported what everyone knows as COBRA Mesh, which is an awesome feature for supporting much longer distances, better reliability within RF-rich environments, and also the ability to navigate very difficult signal topographies as far as getting around barriers and all kinds of crazy things. So mesh was a really, really big undertaking for us. 100th of a second timing accuracy, so more accurate scripting precision. And then we introduced a whole 2.0 version of the control panel, right? So an upgrade to the app on the Android for supporting a manual firing interface and also field map functionality. Any questions, anything, panelists? I just kind of keep going here.
Oh, keep on.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent. I see some beard comments in there. Very nice. All right.
I can grow beard if I want, okay?
All right. Ah, Johnny 5. He's very intense right now. He's shooting his powerful laser. Yes. Much respect. So we are very soon, drink to that, going to come out with 5.1 here. We almost had it this week, guys, but we ended up having to work a little bit more on one of the sections, unfortunately. But we're close here. And so 5.1, let's just talk a little bit about what's going to come out 5.1. 5.1 is really not a major release, but there happen to be a couple of improvements. But the primary goal of 5.1 was to be a stable release candidate. So right now, 5.0.2 is still a beta. There's still some issues with the 18MA hardware that we have documented. We have cleaned up and fixed. It was a monumental Herculean effort in order to get the 18MA up to speed. But my God, we've done it, and that soldier is going to continue to battle with us for quite some more time here, which is excellent. So the primary amount of effort went into making this a stable release candidate, mainly supporting our good friend, the 18MA. At the top there, I've got that noted that COBRA SMPTE. SMPTE is, if you're not familiar with it, we're going to be doing a full webinar on it, but is a way to use what's called time code to integrate multiple systems together. Those multiple systems can be firing systems. They can be integrating a DMX system with COBRA, a variety of different things. The 5.1 version arms devices in almost half the time, which is pretty cool. So if you use 3.03 and you went to 5.0, you'll realize that the 5.0 is a little bit slower to arm, and we did a ton of work to optimize that to make it a lot faster. It also has a more intuitive device count display, so it actually a little bit more smoothly displays the number of devices as they're coming online onto your controller. There's a script comments feature that we will discuss further when we actually do a webinar on 5.1 when it comes out, but basically the ability to add comments into your script and have those comments appear within the actual control panel. We did a ton to improve on the audio integration and file usability. We extended the length of the audio file name to, I believe, 45 characters. We removed the requirement, applause for everyone in back, to match the file name of the audio file to what's in your script. So if anyone's ever had the issue of trying to start your show and the audio box doesn't play, it's most likely because your file name of your audio file isn't matching what's in the script. So we removed that, which is going to make everyone's life a lot easier. So hopefully some applause on that one. The ability in the control panel, if you do have multiple scripts within your 18R2, by selecting a different script on the control panel, it makes that script the primary script in the 18R2, loads it into the modules, and allows for full support of unlimited channels. So if you did want to have multiple scripts with different audio files, and you wanted each of those scripts to have unlimited channel support, using the control panel to select those scripts, that now becomes available within 5.1. There's the ability to edit script attributes within the 5.1, not necessarily the events yet, but at least the attributes. There's a continuous clock and much more, also including some audio output playing features, which we'll, again, cover within the actual 5.1 webinar when 5.1 comes out. Excellent. So keep going, guys. Any questions? I see some of the Q&A in there. We can talk a little bit about that later. All right. Excellent. So let's jump to the last one here, 5.0 to 6.0. So we have been actually working quite actively on 6.0. So 6.0, believe it or not, is actually really far along within development. All the features are pretty much built at this point, and in some cases actually being beta tested. So even though we're working on releasing 5.1, it's not like we're about to start 6.0. 6.0 is quite far along with COBRA, to the point where we're just waiting for 5.1 to be done, and then we're going to go through the final testing of 6.0. There's a number of features in 6.0. These are a couple of the highlights. There's more to this, but a few highlights are the ability to refire cues within the script. For example, with special effects hardware integrations, flame projectors, cryojets, things like that. And also be able to vary the pulse times, right? So if you want to basically fire events, refire those events, and fire those for a defined period of time. That's supported within 6.0. We also have the ability to support disabling of either modules, positions, or groupings of queues based on how you've defined them within your script file. So if you define like all of your willows and or high wind items, or your parachutes or whatever it is, it's like, hey, you want to disable those. Those can be disabled instantly from the control panel in real time with this feature. And we've also, for Big Show support, that's my Big Show icon. We've gone from 100 to 400 channels to support 7,200 queues. How that's displayed on the module is after you get to channel 99, where it says C99, it just simply removes the C and displays a 1. So it'll be 100, 101, all the way up to 399. So 400 channel support will be available within 6.0. Excellent. So that basically kind of takes you a little bit in the past with what we've done, where we currently sit now, a little bit of the future. And with that, Joel, if you want to give a demo, unless there's any, Jay, we are working on FSK, but we don't have a time frame. But if you want to email me, that's fine. I can probably help you out a little bit more with that. Any questions or anything from the panelists? Anything worth bringing up, or should I just hand this right over to you, Joel?
Do you want to touch on anything referring software before I get into the demonstration?
You can, sure. So if you go, yeah, not a problem. So if you go to our website and you go to the support section and you go to firmware, this is where I'm right here. If you click on the reprogramming software page, this will take you right to our wireless reprogrammer, okay? And within here, if you want to download the software, just simply go to this page. Again, go to support, firmware, and then click on the wireless reprogrammer banner. Or you can just search for wireless reprogrammer in the website. And we have a 64-bit and a 32-bit version for different versions of Windows. If you're not sure which version of Windows you're running, all you do is you just click on this link. It's really, really easy. And you just simply, Ryan, oh, here it is. You just click on this, you click on open settings, and I believe this tells me exactly what I'm running, right? So I happen to be running a 64-bit, which is showing right here, okay? So you can download and install the software, and once it's installed, you'll need a wireless reprogrammer, this device right here, to perform this. Once you buy this device, you only need to buy it once. You can use this for any firmware updates in the future. It's not something that we charge any form of recurring fees on, and we also do not charge any money for firmware updates on our systems. All of it's free. All right, how's that, Joel?
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to launch a poll while I get set up on my side. So I'm just doing a general poll. If you've been with us for 8 weeks now, some of these will look familiar. So the poll is, which of the following options have been previous webinar drinking games?
All right, I'm going to stop sharing, Joel, and allow this to hand off to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Can you see reprogramming software now?
Yeah,
Okay.
but, so before you go forward, Chris is asking, so he's got an old 4-year-old wireless programmer, I'm assuming the black and red one. It's not the same chipset, right? That we're being sold, being sold today, but it is fully supported under the new reprogramming software. If you do connect your programmer and it's not loading, you'll get a message saying that it wasn't able to be detected. And there's a software document in there that you can go ahead and follow to correct that, so it will talk to the new software.
And if you have any questions, Mr. Zach is obviously, and him and Anvar are happy to help you guys with anything.
Yes.
You're laughing, Jonah. Just focuses the camera right on you. Just.
So pretty much all these in some type of form have been some drinking game.
Take a drink after he said he was happy to help.
Okay.
All right, good one.
So I'm going to go ahead and go into the reprogramming software. So at this point, I've already opened the reprogramming software. We're assuming you've downloaded it from the website. I plug in my wireless reprogrammer, and then I open the program, and this will be the first screen you land on after it finds your reprogrammer. So the first option here is what firmware is on your current device. So we're going to run through an 18M and an 18R2, just showing you how easy it is to use. We're first going to use an 18M. So when you turn on any piece of equipment, the first number displayed here, that is my firmware number. In this case, I am on 502. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm just going to reprogram from 502 to 502. Or no, I'll do 502 to 503 to 303. So it's just going to ask you what firmware are you on. So we're going to say 502. And this is going to say what firmware do you want to load. In this case, we're going to go backwards. Normally you wouldn't do this. I just have it on 502 from the earlier session. We're going to go to 303. And then the next option is what firmware are we upgrading? I'm sorry, what unit are we upgrading? 18M. You'll notice there are two 18M options. One's 9 volt and one's LiPo. In this case, it is a LiPo unit here with external power. So we're going to select this option, 18M LiPo and external power. Now we're being asked, do we need to calibrate? This is normally done only if you're installing a 9 volt 18M into a LiPo kit or replacing your LiPo kit. In this case, I'm already installed. So we're assuming you've already calibrated in the past. If you buy from us, it comes pre-calibrated. So we're going to say no to calibration. This screen here is just telling you how to put the unit into program mode. There's two ways on the 18M. The first way, we're going to turn the unit on once it boots up here and is on the channel. We're going to push the sync button for a few seconds and pushing and holding. You'll see P displayed. That is now in program mode. So we're ready to proceed with reprogramming. You can also, with the 18M A and B, not the 36M audio box or 18R2, which I'll cover in just a second, but with the 18M, you can hold sync, turn it on, and it will go straight into program mode. Again, that's different than the 18R2 audio box and 36M and 72M. So if you're not sure how to do it, we do have a video link right here as well on how to put into program mode. We'll click next here, and we are now scanning for that device. If you're having trouble finding the device, make sure the antenna is on the unit and make sure the unit is in program mode. On firmware 301 and 2.1.1, there's not a program mode. So if the unit falls asleep, you just want to keep the unit awake when you're doing this process. Someone actually emailed earlier specifically asking about a unit not being found. So make sure antenna's on. If you're on 303 or newer, make sure it's in program mode. If on 301 or older, make sure the unit's awake. And if the unit is not found, there is a rescan option in the bottom right of this program here. And you'll see this could take some time. While that is finding that unit, I do have another poll. And that is, how many hours a day does Zach spend on support calls? You'll notice we started out at 2 hours. I mean, it's just...
That's true. It did have the raise, and I think we clarified in the last webinar that we pay Zach in jelly beans and hugs. So...
All right, so while you guys are answering that poll, you'll see that our module is found. Over here on our list, it says device 18M and devices found 1. If you had more than one 18M on, they would show in this list here, and they'll show the total number found on this count as well. So at this point, we'll just click next. And now we are reprogramming from 502 to 303, which you'll see it's telling us right here at the top. 1 device to update, 0 devices complete. And 18M here is showing us updating. Again, if you had multiple 18Ms, they would show in this list here. So for example, if the first one's updating, it would show status is updating. The second one, or if it's on the second one, it would show the first one's completed, the second one's updating, kind of thing, as it goes through them. And again, each step can take a few seconds. So we'll go ahead and share the results from the previous poll. while Zach needing a raise might influence you to choose that option, technically, we bought him a pillow that does have phone support, so you can call him anytime, any day.
That's true.
That's the correct answer, but it's okay. Is there a limit to the amount of devices? Not necessarily. I would just recommend keeping it to a smaller set of units. The more units you have, the more difficult it would be to keep track of all of them. So if you're doing batches of like 3 to 5, it's just easier to keep track of what units are being reprogrammed. So you'll see it now shows device completed on the 18M. It actually restarts. So we're now back on the channel. So if we click next here on reprogramming software, it'll say verify firmware. So we went from 502 back to 303. So we turn the unit off and turn it back on. You'll see we are now on 303. Okay. So then we finished our 18M. Now we're going to move on to 1802. There's a start over button in the top right. Once we click that, it goes back to the firmware selector page. Grab my 1802 here. And you'll see we are on 505, which is 502 technically. It's just a patch version of 502. So we're going to say we're on 502. And let's go ahead and go back to 303 as well. So we're going to select 303. And we're doing the 18R2, so we're going to select 18R2. Okay, so now this one is slightly different than the 18M. You can't turn it on to program mode by holding sync and turn the unit on. You have to turn it on, let it boot up, and then hold sync to put in program mode. And I'll explain why you have to do that in just a second. So now we're on channel. Go and hold sync here. Goes into program mode. So we can click next on this screen. And this will take just a second to find the device. Let's see if I have any other polls. Okay, this one's not very funny, guys, but it's just, you know, it's for our information purposes. That is, when you chose a firmware, why did you choose it, basically?
Mm-hmm.
Zach's powered down. He has a few hours of rest before he's back online. Never mind, he's ready to go for tomorrow.
All right.
Support emails right now here.
He only needs like 30 seconds to 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we now have our 18R2 found. Just like the 18M, it'll show the device name here in the list. We can click next. And now it says updating firmware from 502 to 303, one device to update. The one device completes the 18M we did earlier, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and end that previous poll, share with you guys. So it looks like most people, it's the newest release, or there's a feature, which in this case, the newest release includes mesh, so that would make sense.
Mesh. It's good.
Okay, so it says we have now completed the 18R2, so we're going to click next here. And so the reason why the 18R2 has to be first turned on and then put into program mode is because it also has to have the processor updated, which Scott mentioned earlier. And in order to do that, we're going to copy the file onto our USB drive, and then that is loaded into the 18R2 by holding sync and turn the unit on with the USB drive installed. So you'll kind of see our steps here on the left. We're going to first choose a USB drive, and it shows, for example, my operating system. I just have the USB drive here, so we're going to click on that, and then we'll click copy. And you'll see that it says the file is now successfully on my USB drive, so click OK. Next step here, power off my 18R2. So turn that off, and then we'll insert the USB drive that you just copied that file to into the 18R2. And then when we hold sync now and turn the unit on, you'll see the LEDs start to chase around. That's loading the S19 file. And after a few seconds, that should go solid green, and the unit will show or reboot. So you'll see that it showed 303 on remote. So we have successfully loaded 303 onto the 1802. So in this case, we just click next. And it basically is telling us to verify that we did indeed load 303. If there's a problem loading it, as Scott mentioned earlier, it would show ER6. In this case, it did not, so we know we're good to go. And you can click the Start Over button and go back and do your audio box or whatever other units you have. There's one other thing to note on reprogramming software. If when you're reprogramming, if a unit does not show anything on the screen, it's okay, don't freak out. On this page here, there's a Other Features option. Click Other Features, and there is an option to recover an unresponsive device. So if something times out, it's not booting up. Try this option first, see if you can recover that unit, and if not, then just reach out to us. And that pretty much covers, excuse me, programming software. Every other unit's pretty much the same of what we just did. Either 18R and 18M is the same process. Audio box, 36M, 18R2 is all the same process.
All right, thank you so much, Joel, for that wonderful demonstration. You get an A+. All right, great. So I guess, so that basically ends our, the actual presentation part of the webinar. So we will now go into a general QA session, right? And so here we go. All right, so maybe I missed it. So Chris asked maybe if I missed it from a previous webinar or comment, but what is the difference between firmware that is stable versus firmware that is beta? That's a great question. So, you know, with COBRA, when we do go into a beta firmware and we put it on our website or we make it available through the reprogramming software for use, we do feel comfortable that that software can be used within professional paid events. Okay, so it's not like a software version that we know there's going to be all these problems and we're looking for people to help test and find issues. Of course, if there are any issues, we want to know about that. That is part of the beta, but it is absolutely something that we're comfortable with you using within a, you know, within an actual show. We do on the website, for example, document what any of the known issues are for that beta so that we're transparent in any problems that we may have. And the goal is that once we're really comfortable with the firmware version and we have to make any fixes or changes, then we eventually release the stable version. I will tell you that when we came out with, we're in this kind of mode right now where we came out with 4.0, we came out with 5.0, and we've kind of kept 5.0 in beta for quite some time now, mainly because it's actually taking us a pretty substantial amount of time to basically make the 18MA fully compatible with 5.0, and I can assure you that that it's going to happen. We've actually made it happen. It's done. We're just in some of these final tweaking phases to get everything nice and polished off, because when we do this final release, we want to make sure that we're not going to, you know, the goal is to minimize, you know, releases after that. Donald asked, I saw that wireless was not needed, but I'm confused on what communication channel the reprogrammer is using. If I download the software to my desktop, which does not have Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi card, that is the question in regards to the modules and not the 18R2, which I can see is using a USB. So Donald, the COBRA wireless reprogrammer stick that we were talking about, I don't know, Jonah, if you've got it, you can kind of hold it up or whatever, or not Jonah, Joel. This device, this COBRA wireless reprogrammer, actually has a transceiver built into it. So that metal square that's right there is actually a transceiver that is communicating. Thank you, Joel. Vanna himself is helping us, and essentially it is communicating to the 18M through the USB, through that wireless transceiver, to send the firmware update. So it's not actually using, you know, native Bluetooth or any native version of Wi-Fi. It's actually using the USB peripheral and communicating to that to the external transceiver, which is talking to the 18M or whatever transceiver that we are updating. Okay, wow, that went fast. Looks like some people clicked questions over there. So, all right, anything in chat there? It looks like a pretty happy, friendly. So we actually didn't have that many Q&A questions from the webinar earlier today. So unless there's anything else, panelists, anything, you guys got anything, we can kind of at least wrap up the formal QA section of this.
There's one, not really. It's so it's was it Jason? I think asking demonstrate the programming on a 6M.
Oh,
But
well, it's the exact same as an 18.
it's yeah. So same thing. So all you do is you just turn it on, right? And then once it boots up, same process.
Oh. Is
And
this
then you
like
just
the
hold
6M Club
yeah,
or something like
yeah.
that? I don't have one. I don't even
And
have
then
one.
you hold sync, and then you get P. But same thing with the 18M. You can hold sync and turn it on, and go right into program mode.
We decided that you were taking too long to release them, so we made them for ourselves.
Yeah.
Then why is that? That's not even me.
I know, just teasing.
To actually Hugh 6M Hugh, and I know we actually emailed back and forth. 5.1 firmware version will actually support the 6M, and your units will be able to go to 5.1 if needed. So. So, all right. What's the distance between the reprogram and the module? That's a great question. I'm not sure how far. I wouldn't go, I would say rooms.
Well, it's technically the same transceiver that's used in the.
It is the
That's
same,
not
but
the
it doesn't have the external antenna. So
if you imagine taking a module, removing the
I
antenna,
think it's
and then
tongue
taking.
in cheek.
Yeah. So you can test it if you want to in your own home.
yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's for the YouTube. Wow. All right. Well, for the YouTube channel, we'll wrap. So we're not going to obviously. So first off, thank you to everyone for coming to the webinar. Always appreciate it. This is our 8th webinar. Holy cow! Moving on to our 9th webinar, which is actually going to be quite something special. So keep your eyes out in the next couple days. We've got a really, really, really cool. I think really cool and different plan for next week. So stay tuned for that email. Check out our website. Thank you, panelists, everybody. Thank you, Joel, for the reprogramming software demonstration, and everyone else for participating in the chat and the QA panel and the QA windows on our panelists. So thank you guys so much. Always appreciate it. And thanks to our customers.